Good morning, Colorado. You are listening to the Daily Sun Up. It's a conversation with the Colorado Sun. I'm team editor David Krause. Before we jump into today's conversation, here is a quick message from our sponsor.
Support comes from Credit Union of Colorado, proud to call Colorado home for more than 90 years. They're a local institution with a track record of showing up for the community and putting people first. Credit Union of Colorado. Honestly good. Learn more at honestlygood.org. Ready for your next adventure? SCP Wild Free Colorado Springs Hotel is a reimagined vintage motel and base camp for those who wander with purpose and return with stories. Dog-friendly, planet-conscious, and rooted in our Colorado community. Explore SCP Wild Free Colorado Springs Hotel and book your unforgettable summer travel today at scphotel.com/Colorado Springs. You deserve a bank that fits your lifestyle, with financial services delivered by people who truly understand your community. From the Western Slope to the Front Range, Alpine Bank is proud to be Colorado's community bank. Learn more at alpinebank.com.
Now, back to the show. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Every year in Colorado and other select cities, the minimum wage is adjusted according to inflation. Joining me today to talk about what to expect for 2027 is business reporter Tamara Chuang. Hello, Tamara.
Hey, David.
Tamara, always a yearly story about this time of year that folks are really interested in, especially those among us who make the least wages. The state and municipalities are setting their minimum wages for next year. Let's start there, Tamara. What are the wages getting set at? And remind our listeners a little bit of how and why some cities have their own minimum wage versus the state's wage.
Sure. So Colorado has a minimum wage that is pegged to inflation, and it really only looks at the first 6 months of every year. So any sort of change in that is the rate you're going to get for the Colorado minimum wage earners. And for 2027, that's going to be $15.71, which is up 55 cents from a year ago. But as you mentioned, statewide, there are actually municipalities, local governments that have also set their own wage. And that's due to a 2019 law that passed just before the pandemic, and also had encouraged the city of Denver to start raising its minimum faster than the rest of the state. That's why we've seen, Denver's rate is the highest statewide. And in 2027, it's going up to $19.84. So that's up about 2.9% from, this year's rate. But other cities and counties have followed suit. We've got Edgewater and Boulder County that started their own minimum wage in 2024. The city of Boulder started in 2025. So far, no others have joined in, which means, if you're not in one of those cities or in Boulder County, you are going to be making the state minimum wage, which is, not the highest in the land, but we are pretty up there compared to some of our neighbors like Kansas and Utah, which are stuck at the federal minimum wage at $7.25. So
that federal minimum wage, I know you and I have talked about this on and off through the years on the podcast, has not changed since 2009. It's still at $7.25, right?
Right. And there's a lot of advocates trying to push that wage up, but no one has been successful, obviously since 2009. So that was 17 years ago.
Good math for the business reporter. Tamara, you mentioned the small town of Edgewater. It's about 5,400 residents. It's west of Denver, the city of Denver. It has a new wage standard, but they're kind of riding shotgun with Denver. Tell us what's going on in Edgewater as far as what their minimum wage is going to be and what it could have been.
Sure, sure. So, as I mentioned, Denver was the first to set its wages. And anytime a new city or county does decide to increase their wages, they're doing it because they feel like minimum wage just isn't enough for their residents. And by pushing it up faster, that will help those earning the least afford a little more. So, in Edgewater, when they adopted their own minimum wage, they also provided here's what it will probably look like for the next couple of years, because they really wanted to get it up higher faster. So, it's gone up several dollars in recent years. And this year it was supposed to be, well, actually for 2027, their rate was going to be $19.99. So that had me thinking, oh, well, actually Edgewater is going to bypass Denver as being the highest minimum wage area in Colorado. But the city, their intention wasn't to get higher than to be the top minimum wage place in the state. And the city council had passed a resolution or an ordinance, I think earlier in the summer, to match Denver's, just in case Denver's wage didn't get to $19.99. And as I mentioned, Denver's wage will be $19.84, which may be kind of a auspicious number there, but it's Edgewater will be at $19.84 as well for next year. But the city council will actually be meeting Tuesday night, which is tonight, to talk about something different. It's the tip minimum wage. And that is another big, discussion and debate that is changed last year when a state legislature passed a new law allowing the same local governments to decide whether to change their tip minimum wage. So did you want me to explain the tip minimum?
Yeah, let's keep going down that road.
Okay, cool. So the tip minimum is basically if you're a tipped worker and you earn extra tips from customers, your employer can pay you less. So less than the state's minimum wage. So that is, whatever the prevailing local wage is minus $3.02. And, I've written about why that's at $3.02, but, it's really because that's where it was way back when Colorado decided to move its wage up faster, which is more than, 16 years ago. But anyway, so last year, state law allowed local governments to change how much that tip minimum wage should be. And they call it a tip credit. So what that really means is, that $3.02 I mentioned, employers can subtract that from the local minimum wage. So in Denver, it was like this year, the minimum wage is $19.29, minus $3.02, that's your tip minimum. But after the tip minimum wage passed last year, that gave the local cities the authority to, provide a bigger offset. And the reason for that is that restaurants were struggling. We've heard a lot of these reports. I've written about them. But, restaurants' costs have gone up, not just with food, rent, other costs, but also wages. So every time the minimum wage goes up, pretty much a lot of the area's restaurants have to raise wages for their lowest paid workers, but also, some who are making slightly more than the lowest paid workers. And this was a way to help those employers survive, because a lot of restaurants, as anyone who eats out, you've seen places close. So, whether that's causation, that's unclear, but that's the whole point of changing the minimum wage. The tip minimum wage. And Edgewater was the only one to act on that new law. And so for this year, they changed that offset to $4.67. So that means employers in their city who pay the minimum wage can take what it was. Let's see. It used to be Edgewater was at $18.17. So their tip minimum wage stayed the same as what it was a year ago. So there's been no change, and that's what they're going to be discussing.
And so walk me through that again, what Edgewater specifically, they want to lower what their offset is for tipped wage?
I'm not sure. We'll hear more about it when they discuss it during city council. But the issue is, they were trying to help their restaurants survive by, creating this larger offset. That means the tip workers would make $13.50 this year versus $18.17. So that's like a $4 difference. This year, they're not sure if they're going to keep it that rate or if they're going to increase it or lower it, because essentially when the tip minimum wage changes, according to state law, the tipped worker is going to make a little less per hour. But, of course, they make extra tips, and they have to make at least enough tips to cover minimum wage. So they will always get paid minimum wage, but now a larger part of their paycheck will be covered by tips.
Tamara, you kind of touched on the concerns and always the pushback from the restaurant industry. They always pay attention to this. The focus in that industry has been on those making the least. You've got another great chart. Your stories always have such awesome charts in them, breaking down that difference, but kind of give us some of the highlights on how those making the least wage have kind of come up and are making more than, say, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, so I talked to an economist over at the Colorado Fiscal Institute, and he was sharing lots of great information on how he was taking some of this data to see what was the impact of a higher minimum wage in Denver. And part of it was that the bottom 25th percentile of workers saw a greater increase in their overall pay. Their earnings jumped 62% in between 2019 and 2025, whereas workers in the same, and this was in the food industry, workers in the food industry who made the 75th percentile in wages, their wages had increased about 50% in the same period. So essentially what he's saying is folks who earned the least saw the bigger boost in pay, whereas food workers who earned more back then, they still saw an increase, but just not as big.
Tamara, last thing for today, your reader poll. I thought it was interesting asking people not to look and try to guess the minimum wage in Denver. Were you surprised? What were the results? And give us some of that information.
Yeah, just to get people interested in taking the poll, I kind of just put out the number, what is Denver's minimum wage without peeking? Can you guess? And so I tossed out a handful of numbers. And surprisingly, well, this was back on Friday when I was writing this up, only 28.9% picked the right answer, which for 2026, the minimum wage in the city of Denver is $19.29. I can tell you that we are, now recording on Monday for Tuesday, and more people have put their hat in and picked an answer. So we're now at 42% picked the right answer. I guess they peeked, or I guess they read the story. So
there you go. They're paying attention at this point, right?
Right.
Tamara, always a lot of fun catching up with you for our Tuesday podcast. If you haven't already, listeners, you can check out Tamara's latest story about the minimum wage, as well as a bunch of other great business news from around Colorado. You can always find it on our homepage and on our free Colorado Sun app. Tamara, my friend, make it a great week.
You too, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for listening. And finally, here are a few stories that you should know about today.
Workers at a meatpacking plant in Fort Morgan on Monday overwhelmingly approved a new contract with Cargill Meat Solutions. The agreement ends a lockout that has kept 1,700 people out of work since May 20th. Union leaders say Cargill will bring workers back in phases over the next 30 days. Weeks of rainy weather are helping to revive struggling lawns in some parts of Colorado, but they have done little to ease the state's prolonged drought. A spokesperson for Denver Water says the storms were largely isolated and made little significant impact on water storage for the state's largest provider. A dangerous new pest has invaded Carter Lake in Larimer County, raising concerns about its impact on the local ecosystem. New Zealand mud snails are voracious eaters that reproduce quickly. They can strip water habitats of food for fish, insects, and birds. The snails have no nutritional value and can starve fish that eat them.
To read these stories and much more, visit our website, coloradosun.com. As an award-winning nonprofit news outlet, we take our mission of credible, independent journalism seriously, and you can check out our trust indicators at coloradosun.com/ethics. Our music is by the Denver-based Matt Skellinger Group. A link to their music is in our show notes, and a special thanks to Swallow Hill Music. I'm David Krause. See you next time.